Welcome to episode 173 of the Various and Sundry podcast. I'm your host, Matt Harmon, joined live from the Vault Studio on the beautiful campus of Grace College and Theological Seminary by my good friend, my colleague, my co-host, and the man who is ramping up preparations for the Day of Giving, John Scott Sloat.
Doc, what's happening?
Well, we've got a little bit of an unusual experience happening today. We actually have a videographer in our presence.
Yep.
Yeah.
He's videoing my face right now.
Yes, it's a good thing you're so photogenic.
Yeah. Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's why I do podcasts, because I'm so photogenic.
A face made for radio. That's us. That's us. But you're getting ready for Day of Giving. Why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about which this episode actually drops on the Day of Giving, right?
Yes. So April 25th is Day of Giving at Grace College. So just about every institution does some form of this in the spring. Yeah. An opportunity for alumni, donors, friends of the university to give mostly to our general fund, which goes to student scholarships, things like that. We have a goal of, I think, 1.1 million.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and we're most.
And how much of that are you personally giving?
Probably like less than. Gosh, you asked me to do math on the podcast.
Yeah,
this is
it's
not
always
good.
a risk.
Very little.
Yes.
Very little.
Okay,
but something.
Maybe we should get our podcast fund to give something to the institution.
Yeah. That podcast fund.
Yeah.
But. Yeah, I'll actually throw a Day of Giving link into the show notes if that's okay.
Why not?
And they can watch everything. We have a $50,000 match, so every dollar given to Grace College and Seminary through the Day of Giving campaign is matched up to $50,000. So
awesme.
We would love our listeners to step up in giving to Grace College and Seminary.
Yeah, fantastic opportunity. So tell me about your weekend. What was going on this past weekend for you?
My goodness, what even happened this past weekend? Lot of little projects. So cleaning up the garage, we just moved. Had to mow the yard of the old house, things like that. Not too much to write home about.
Your previous home, which you're finally closing on
the cusp
this week.
On the cusp.
You had to start from scratch with the grass.
Yeah.
The house you're currently in, though, came with a fully ready to go lawn and
it's been established for 30 years. Almost 30 years.
Okay, so what is the condition of the lawn as you took possession of the house?
It's stunning.
Yeah?
It's beautiful. Yeah. Okay. Now, the neighborhood I moved into is a bit fussier about lawns than the previous neighborhood I lived in.
Are there specific codes that you must live up to?
Maybe not written codes, but certainly a cultural code, if I can say it like that.
It's a big neighborhood. I mean, that's a pretty sizable.
It's massive.
Little – can you even call it a subdivision? I mean, it's huge.
It's just a division. There's no sub about it.
There's no sub. Yes. So size of the lot, is it comparable in terms of what you had before?
It's about the same. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. Maybe a little bit more grass, but it's about the same.
I mean, you are our resident expert in grass growing.
Well, you want to know what? I mowed the new lawn and then went and mowed the old lawn. And the old lawn, I went, this is garbage.
Yeah.
Who's been caring for this?
Well, I mean, it's hard to start a yard from scratch. There's especially in as we've been well documented on this podcast, the clay soil that you've had to deal with in the other house. So in any case, you ready to talk some sports?
Sure. Can I mention a few things just real quick?
Yeah.
So this is the Various and Sundry podcast. Our Twitter handle is at VNSPod. You can email the show at variousandsunderpodcast@gmail.com. We would ask that you subscribe to the podcast on wherever you listen to find podcasts. We can be found wherever fine podcasts are found. Boy, that was tough to say.
Yeah.
We have a Facebook page that I'm sure stuff happens there. There is a YouTube channel where I am also sure things happen.
Sure.
And we would love you to leave a 5-star rating and a snarky review.
Snarky, yes, especially. Yeah. Well, thanks for stepping in there. And
I know the videographer threw you off.
It does.
It's really his fault.
I am a creature of habit, and when you move around that just that messes with my consistency.
Well, I noticed something was off when you asked about the lawn that early.
Yeah, well, We're always desperate for content. So. All right. Now can we move on to sports?
We can.
Okay. So this weekend, the NBA playoffs continued. We have to do this much to the chagrin of Nate in Ohio.
And your kids.
And my sons, yeah. The Cavs trail the New York Knickerbockers.
The New York Knickerbockers. Very difficult to say.
3-1 now.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. How surprised are you? Are you surprised by this at all?
I'm a little surprised.
Okay.
I thought Donovan Mitchell would be more dominant than he has been, but the Knicks have been really good on the glass. Mm-hmm. Julius Randle has not had a great series, but R.J. Barrett and Jalen Brunson have been incredible, as well as the big men for the Knicks. They've both been very, very good. And the big men for the Knicks seem to be the difference makers on the particularly the offensive glass. Is that your assessment?
Yeah, I'm surprised at – it seems like the Cavaliers have not matched the intensity of the Knicks at sort of the playoff level intensity, and I think that's probably just a reflection of being a young team. But Donovan Mitchell's not young. He's been in the playoffs before. He's got plenty of experience. But he was a no-show in Game 4 this past weekend. Very surprising. The Cavs they don't look like the same team they were in the regular season. And now they've put themselves in a pretty significant hole. Yeah.
Game 1, the Knicks, I think, just barely won. Game 2, they lost pretty significantly.
Yeah.
Game 3, they really blew out the Cavs. And then the Cavs made a third-quarter push in Game 4.
Yeah.
But were ultimately –
It's hard, though, to play that poorly for a whole half and then just turn it on and end up trying to win a playoff game on the road like that. That's just hard to do.
I do love watching game highlights from Knicks playoff games because it's always like half basketball, half what celebrities were in attendance of this game.
Yeah.
John McEnroe was there.
Exactly.
There's a lot of
Ben
Stiller.
Are you suggesting that's not the same for highlights of the Cleveland Cavaliers, that they don't have the same sort of star power sitting courtside?
I don't think so.
I'm sure you're right.
I'm trying to think who would even show up.
Other athletes probably.
I was thinking LeBron James might be the most famous person from Cleveland right now.
He's otherwise occupied. Yes. Speaking of which, over in the West, then, perhaps a little surprising, the Lakers are up 2-1 on the Grizzlies, but they play tonight. So we're recording on a Monday. So by the time this drops, that could be 2-2. It could also be 3-1. But the Lakers are a dangerous team. I think we've talked about that.
They're my pick for the Western Conference.
It wouldn't be shocking to see them come out of the West. Sacramento and the Warriors are tied at 2 games apiece. Did you catch any of the end of that game yesterday?
I caught highlights.
Okay. The commentators were going off about basically how, Sacramento's so young, they don't have the experience to close out games. And then Steph Curry makes a colossally stupid mistake with about 40 seconds that nearly cost them the game. They're up 5 at that point, and with the ball, he's bringing the ball up the court, and Curry calls a timeout. He goes Chris Webber on us, calls a timeout the Warriors don't have, which means Sacramento gets a technical free throw and the ball back. And it all works out to the point where Sacramento has the ball with 10 seconds left eventually with a chance to win the game. And they miss the shot. But it's just funny to see them, the commentators love fest for Stephanie Curry there. And then they're like, oh, gosh, he made a mistake. And it's just, for him to go Chris Webber, talking about his basketball IQ and all this sort of stuff. I'm not the biggest Stephanie Curry fan, as you might be able to tell.
Well, but you're calling him Stephanie, which is a indicator.
He's the greatest shooter in the history of the NBA. I don't dispute that.
And he's been great for the NBA.
I just don't like his antics. I just don't like his antics. So, all right. Well, we can resume normal programming now.
I know the videographer's gone.
Yeah, that was weird.
It was a little weird, although
He did a great job of making himself as little noticeable as possible.
What is that for? Why are we being videoed?
Well, we're doing our Master of Divinity online. All these classes, every class we offer residentially, we're offering online.
Is that a core course for the MDiv now, the VNS pod?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
So they have you record an introduction to the class, like basically like a personal – we do a welcome. So that's supposed to be something personal about you as the prof.
Mm-hmm.
Well, after you've done like 5 of these already, it's like, what do I say different? I've already talked about my family. I've talked about this. I've talked about that. And then so this most recent one, I talked about the fact that I went to college thinking I was going to be a sports broadcaster, and that God obviously redirected me, but still gives me outlets to use some of those gifts and abilities. And I mentioned this pod. And so they thought, what better way to enhance that welcome than to shoot some what's called B-roll footage of us doing the podcast. So there you go.
So when you were at your last ditch at the end of the lane for ideas of what to tell people about yourself, you finally came to the podcast.
This came in 6th. Yes.
Okay.
Hey, it made the top 10.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. Why not? Yeah. I think that's good on NBA playoffs. Why don't we move on to NFL draft update? So that's this week, finally. I don't understand why the NFL does such a gap between the end of their season and the draft itself. I don't understand that.
I think it's so they own the off season, because you talk about it for 2 months leading up to the draft.
Okay, but
and then you're in the off season workouts and those sorts of things.
I don't know. And of course, as is always the case, there's always the ridiculousness that surrounds certain picks of, teams were high on this guy, and then suddenly it's like, oh my gosh, his draft stock is falling through the floor.
My sense about the NFL draft is teams lie.
100%.
That they just put out all the false information about who they're thinking about taking. They drop it to this reporter or that reporter in an attempt to misdirect everybody.
There's absolutely a ton of that, but there's been a lot of negative buzz around C.J. Stroud of Ohio State.
His receivers are too good? Is that the
No. So first there was this ridiculous report from Brady Quinn mentions on a podcast. Well, I heard that he ghosted the Peyton Manning quarterback camp. So that speaks to his character about not following through or whatever. Okay, well, first of all, other people came out and said that's just not true. Basically came out and said that's just not true. I can demonstrate, just dumb stuff like that.
I remember this happening last week.
And then the other thing that's come out apparently about C.J. Stroud is they don't do the Wonderlic test anymore. You remember the old Wonderlic test?
Yeah, they did like your intelligence.
Yes. Mm-hmm. That's supposed to be predictive of whatever. Okay. Well, they do some different test. I think it's called the S2 now or something like that.
I like Wonderlic better, just from a naming.
100%. And allegedly, C.J. Stroud's score was significantly lower than the other quarterbacks that are at the top of the draft. There were also reports coming out about his work ethic and all this sort of stuff. It's just like, where is this stuff coming from? Because all of his teammates, all of his coaches at Ohio State, even reporters who cover the team were like, this is absurd. He's the first in the film room, last in the building kind of guy. He's all these weird things. So when the Panthers initially traded for the number 1 pick, the betting odds were that C.J. Stroud was going to be their guy.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's not the case. And now some reports are saying he could drop out of the top 7. And if it's over a stupid, written test,
everybody lies, Matt.
I know.
Everybody lies.
But see, here's part of what is wrong with you get people who rely on a dumb written test rather than just looking at the film and going, can he do the job? Right? Mm-hmm. Or you get people who who get wowed by some guy who had mediocre or sort of ordinary statistics in a big league like the SEC or the Big Ten or something like that, but is a sort of weight room freak. So he goes to the combine and he lifts more than anybody else and he runs the faster 40. But then you turn on the tape and you're like, but he didn't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
It boggles my mind how
it's kind of Josh Allen, right? I mean, Josh Allen was an absolute freak in the gym, but was kind of underwhelming at where was he? North Dakota.
But that's different. Being no, he was Wyoming.
Wyoming, that's right.
But see, that's a little different, I think, when you play at a not in a top tier conference in college.
Mm-hmm.
If you're playing in the SEC, the Big Ten, the Big 12, the Pac-12, the ACC, if you're playing in one of those conferences and you don't do much of anything, you're just kind of like, not bad. Then why should we think that just because, oh, wow, at the combine you ran the cone drill in 8.7 seconds? That's amazing.
A lot of cones to run around in the NFL.
So, anyway.
I'm mostly with you, but I just don't put any stock. I don't like Mel Kiper, Todd McShay. These guys don't know what's going on.
No.
In fact, Mel Kiper has, I think, gotten better recently because you're going, no, this is what this team should do. I have no clue what they're actually going to do. This is what they should do.
Yeah.
I appreciate that honesty from Mel Kiper.
Yeah. Todd.
Yeah. People who don't get that reference,
it's fine.
Anyway.
Quick update on the Mets.
Center fielder Brandon Nimmo batted .500 on this West Coast trip. Was the number one player in baseball this week. He's been our center fielder for a few years, but newly signed 7 or 8 year contract. Brandon Nimmo, best player in baseball in the last week.
Okay.
Did you see the sticky stuff with
I was going to ask you about Max Scherzer. Yeah.
Yeah. What have you heard about it?
Well, all I heard was that he got ejected after the third inning, maybe second or third inning. He pitched a couple of innings
after the third,
and hadn't given up a hit. Was cruising along, and then the umpires did their sort of examination of him, and was it rosin that
he said rosin and sweat.
Okay,
which he's going to have sweat,
obviously.
And rosin's a legal substance.
Yeah. And they tossed him.
Well, so they checked him after the first inning. They said, your hands are too sticky. Go wash them.
What are they, your mom?
And so they have an MLB official in the dugout, and they watch him wash his hands. They watch him apply rosin. And then they watch him go back out there.
Okay.
The umpire checked him again after the second inning and said, hands are too sticky. Go wash them with alcohol. And so they have it's like rubbing alcohol. Yeah. And so they have him wash his hands. With an MLB official watching, he washes his hands. They watch him apply rosin. He goes back out there. They said, after the third inning, your hands are too sticky, and they toss him from the game.
Okay.
And so in order to get him back so they could have appealed, but in order to get him back in time for the end of the Atlanta Braves series that's coming up, they decided to just accept this suspension.
That's so strange.
The 10-game suspension, yeah. And there have been 3 ejections in the major leagues for sticky substances. They're all from the same umpire. Has ejected the same ejected 3 people.
Okay.
We are waiting for the apology from Major League Baseball to the New York Mets.
Good luck waiting on that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. We have got to move on here to actually get to our main topic. People who skip the sports segment are going to be like, "Oh my gosh, it's 19."
Did something happen?
19 minutes in, and they're not talking about what I want to listen to. Okay, you ready to move on?
Sure.
So our main topic today is the topic of catechesis. John, what is catechesis?
Basically,
what does that term refer to?
Yeah, so it refers to I always think of catechesis. I always think of catechism.
Yep.
So the question and developed answer response. So it's meant to be memorized as a way to develop particularly theology.
Yeah.
So to understand theology.
Okay. All right. So, and why are we talking about this subject besides the obvious answer of we always need content?
Well, I'm trying to remember how we came to this topic because when were we discussing this? Was it January when we had our last power meeting?
It might be. I mean, it's been a while. I mean, this was sort of on our radar for a while, but
yeah, but basically, we wanted to talk about how catechisms exist, like New City Catechism or the Heidelberg Catechism or these different things, as a way to help form our worldview.
Yeah,
and how there are a number of things going on in our world that are also trying to form our worldview, and how that is catechizing in some form or fashion.
Yeah, so part of the impetus was Kevin DeYoung wrote an article, and this is a while ago now. It was when the Olympics were on, so a little while ago.
Nice.
And basically—
Were the Olympics this summer?
No, wasn't that last? No, 22. It's last summer.
So last summer.
Yeah.
Okay.
And basically him pointing out that more than just a sporting event, basically there were embedded worldviews and values that were impossible to avoid while watching the Olympics. So, you know, he's obviously longing for a day when you could just turn on a sporting event and it is the sporting event. And it's who's good, who's better, who wins, who loses, a public, sort of the kind of public interest story connected to it about the athlete who's overcoming some terrible tragedy in their past or family or whatever.
Or about the American swim team lip syncing the Friday song on the airplane. Do you remember this from 4 or 5 years ago? Yeah, the United States swim team. I can't even remember what Olympics it was, but they were flying there, and they did like a video on their phones to the Friday song. If you know the song I'm talking about.
I am familiar with the Friday song, yes.
So, yeah, like I remember watching that piece by NBC.
Yeah. So in any case, his point is that basically you couldn't watch any moment of the Olympics without being catechized in the inviolable truths of the sexual revolution. In other words, basically everything seemed to be permeated by celebrating the latest and greatest quote-unquote advances in culture's understanding of and approach to sexuality. So his basic point, even apart from the Olympics, is simply to say, look, the whole world around us is always actively catechizing, trying to reinforce, to build and then reinforce certain values, beliefs, ideals, and trying to do it in a way that makes those things seem obvious, normal, and right without any measure of reflection. That's his basic point there. And I think that's obviously true.
So here's a quick question for you. On events like the Olympics, you talked about longing for a day where you're just worried about the sport itself, who wins the race, who goes the fastest, who jumps the highest. Is there no communication in humanity that doesn't have some catechesis attached to it? Right? Do you understand what I'm saying? Is there always sort of a, hey, I'm trying to form you, or no matter what I say, I'm trying to form you, and it's just become sort of the anti of what Christians would normally stand for. Does that make sense? Does my question?
Yeah. I mean, if the question is, well, let me back up. There's no such thing as a purely neutral kind of worldview free presentation of anything. Worldview inevitably affects how you talk about anything.
Yeah.
So in that sense, sure, even a sort of seemingly neutral presentation of here's the event, this person won, these people lost, still is in one sense communicating the value of winning and why that's good, right? So there's an implied message there of winning is good, losing is not.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's embedded in a worldview at some level.
Yeah.
But I think so in one sense, that is the larger point. The world around us is always trying to catechize us, even in the way that it talks about certain realities. I mean, it makes me think of the verse in Romans 12 where Paul talks about not being conformed to this world. That basically the way that the world talks about things, portrays things as good, is a form of catechesis. It's trying to instruct you on what is good, what is desirable, what is best, and by contrast, what is bad and to be avoided. So I think part of what he's noticing is just the simple fact that maybe 75 years ago, there was still broadly a loosely Judeo-Christian-ish kind of broad framework that was widely just sort of seen as kind of the starting point. And now that's not the case. And
I think even less than that. I think less than 75 years ago even.
That puts us into the 50s.
I was thinking the 1980s, 1990s, there was still like a broad
I think by then you're starting to – I think by then the sexual revolution of the 60s is probably spinning itself out into more areas. But in any case, so part of the point of the article is just to remind us everything you consume at some level is trying to catechize you. Even whether it's the news, whether it's fiction you're reading, obviously entertainment. I mean, think about entertainment.
Podcast you're listening
That's
to.
Right. That's right.
Classes you're taking, schools you go to.
But think back to and you were too young to probably fully be aware of all that was going on when this
I was
happened.
A very perceptive
I
child.
know, but when Ellen came out on her television show.
I don't remember that.
Mid-90s.
Okay. First grader.
And so you've got this, like, everybody basically knew she was gay. But when she finally came out on her show, it was this like big moment. And then all of a sudden, now look, I mean, how many shows? It feels like if you have any sort of large ensemble cast, there is going to be a homosexual character in that group.
Yep.
That wasn't the case 30 years ago. So entertainment is, I think, probably the biggest means by which catechism takes place in our culture, because it presents what's normal in one sense, or what's to be idealized. He has a great quote in there, borrowing from David Wells, where David Wells talks about. Where's the quote? I want to get it exactly right. David Wells' famous definition of worldliness is whatever makes righteousness look strange and sin look normal. That's worldliness. And that's a great reminder as we look at entertainment. But here's the challenge, of course. We're immersed in this culture. And even if you restrict your media consumption significantly, you're still interacting with other people. You're still in a world where there are efforts to catechize you. And yet, what is the church supposed to accomplish then? If the person just attends Sunday morning service for an hour and a half. So an hour and a half versus, dozens upon dozens of hours. That's a tough imbalance to overcome.
Oh, yeah.
So that kind of sets the stage, I think, for us to talk about what are some ways that we as the church or even as individuals can work towards catechizing ourselves biblically or theologically that keeps us grounded in a biblical worldview?
I don't know if I have a ton of answers for you. Listen to more various and sundry podcasts.
I mean, that's an obvious one.
That's for starters. Listen to every episode twice.
Sure.
Go back to the beginning when we were youthful pups trying to uncover the secrets of the microphone. And
yes.
So a couple things come to mind, and some of it does have to do with how we intake entertainment, which I think I'd actually put like a lot of news in the entertainment category.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, I think reading more. So reading, if you're going to consume news, read more news than you actually watch. And then I'd say just read more broadly. So read fiction, read theology, read really as much as you can as part of your entertainment. That's what comes to mind for me first. How about yourself?
Well, I think I do think being attentive to the sources of input from our culture, whether it's entertainment or news, but I think there are things that we can do as individuals in terms of intake of God's Word. And that doesn't just have to be strict Bible reading, though that's obviously great and central, or listening to Scripture, which is great. But I do think spending time intentionally reading and exposing ourselves to opportunities to grow in our understanding of Scripture and of the gospel, and not just individualistically, but being involved in Christian community is another way where that sort of thing helps catechize us to what is actually true and what is real. Earlier in the episode, you mentioned the whole New City Catechism. I remember when our kids were young, going through a catechism with our kids, and it was great. Loved it, and they still remember
some of the
questions and answers. My boys hate this video. My wife and I love it, but we have a video of them of like Jake is like 2, not quite 2, maybe 2, and John is like 5. And we had them record them. We recorded them doing their questions for their grandparents, and it's adorable. Who made you? God. What else did God make? God made all things. Just simple truths coming out of their mouths. And, did they understand it fully? Of course not. But it's establishing a foundation, a framework for what is true and how the world works and how to think about their experience of the world. And so that we didn't use the New City Catechism because it wasn't out yet. But that is available, and there's a free app.
Yeah, free app for it.
You can access it online. You can access it in an app.
I think our church uses it to go through on Wednesday night or Sunday morning. I can't remember which Jordan does.
And it's just one of those great resources where if somebody and again, sometimes we think, oh, catechism, that's for kids. Well, no, not just for kids. It could be beneficial even for you as an adult individual.
Yeah.
Even building it into part of your devotional time to read one question and the answer and reflect on that.
Well, and Luther had what he calls a large catechism and a small catechism. Small catechism was for children. Large catechism was for larger children, adults.
Yeah.
So, I mean, catechisms are not just for kids.
And I think this is a place where I think churches could be more intentional even in incorporating some of those questions and answers from catechisms into the worship service itself. There's no reason why you can't include that.
Yeah.
You could make it a responsive reading. You could, I think the combination of catechisms and creeds are things that we as churches could be incorporating more consistently. I think most of our listeners probably are in a lower church context, so they're not, not in an Anglican service or a, high church Lutheran context where it's, we read from the creed every week, and
we read the Apostles' Creed every week.
I think sometimes in our low church sensibilities, we immediately, we react to that like, oh gosh, what are we going to become, like Lutheran or something here, or Episcopalian? Well, no, but there's no reason why a good faithful Baptist can't read from the Apostles' Creed.
Their eyes might burn, though, Matt.
So I think that's one way that churches could incorporate more of that, and not just for the kids, but for the adults as well, because it's foolish to think, only kids need catechizing. No, we as adults need catechizing, taught and developed in terms of how we think.
And I would add, adults need to watch their consumption of things that are catechizing, whether it be Twitter, news.
And part of it is even just it's if you're going to consume those things, consuming them thoughtfully, not just passively receiving them and being like, okay, that's it. I think there is a place for us to be obviously reading and engaging and reading in the culture with things we don't agree with.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And so if we're just passively consuming them as opposed to thinking, well, wait a minute, what's the message behind that? What is that trying to get me to do or to think? Or what is it trying to normalize that shouldn't be normalized? Being thoughtful consumers makes a big difference, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we will put a link to Katie Y's article in the show notes. We will also put a link to the New City Catechism.
Yep, we can throw that in
the show notes. But I think it's time for us to move on. You ready?
Yep.
Time now for This Day in Sports History.
All right, This Day in Sports History, April 25th, 2023. It's a good day.
Yeah.
It's a good day. 1974, the NFL moves the goalpost and adopts a sudden death playoff. Is that when they moved the goalpost to the back of the end zone?
Yeah.
Is that when that took place?
Yeah. It's funny to see those old highlights where the goalposts are at the goal line.
Yeah.
And so they're literally in play. You see guys running into them.
Well, I imagine they used them as like picks a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
Why not? Anyway.
Why not?
1980, the Oakland Athletics manager Billy Martin restrained by umpires for attacking a fan. Oh, Billy.
That dude was wild.
Yeah, Billy Martin.
He managed the Yankees, 3 times, I think?
I think so. By the way, did you see the Oakland Athletics bought land in Las Vegas? They're going to be the Las Vegas Athletics?
I did see that they bought land, yes. Yeah. It's wild that we've got professional sports teams settling in Las Vegas now.
Yeah.
But it makes sense. I'm just fascinated by for my whole time growing up and even early adulthood, professional sports wanted to largely stay away from the gambling world. And then it's like a light switch turn where they're like, we could make obscene amounts of money if we just embrace this. And they're like, okay.
Well, they wanted to – I mean, they got rid of it initially because of things like the Black Sox scandal and Pete Rose and, some of those sorts of incidents where people were getting in on throwing a game or impacting the game that didn't make the game – that hurt the integrity of the game, basically.
Yeah. But did you see Jameson Williams is going to be suspended 6 games?
I mean, there were
wide receiver for the Lions.
6 players were.
And it's because he bet on other NFL games, I believe, through one of the apps, FanDuel, DraftKings, whatever. But he did it on team property.
Is that why?
That's why. So it's so apparently the rule is it's okay if you're at your home or wherever else. You just cannot be on team property, whether that's on the team bus, in the facility, like if you're on a road trip you can't bet on it. But if you're at home in your living room, you can throw a few grand down on another NFL team.
Interesting.
Seems like a ridiculously nuanced rule.
That's kind of like Ja Morant having a gun. And they're like, well, he couldn't have it on team property, but because it was at this club, that's what we'll call it, it's okay. It's like,
yes.
He's on the road. How did this come with him?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
1990, boy, that was the longest This Day in Sports History segment over a single thing.
Yeah.
1991, Boston Herald journalist Lisa Olson brings suit against NFL New England Patriots for sexual harassment while covering team. An out-of-court settlement was reached. The league fines the team, and she transfers to a position in Sydney, Australia.
That last part was just weird to me. So she just moves to Australia. Okay.
I mean, if she settled for a good amount of money, not a bad place to retire. 2009, NFL draft Georgia quarterback Matthew Stafford, first pick by the Detroit Lions.
Yep.
Later goes on to win Super Bowl with Los Angeles Rams.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that trade worked out for the Rams, but now they're paying for it, right? I mean, they basically went all in on that 1 year.
That's right.
And it worked. They got the Super Bowl championship. But and now Matthew Stafford, he's showing up in AT&T ads.
That's right.
And Little Caesars ads, I think.
Well, which is funny because Little Caesar
is based in Michigan, isn't it? It's based in Detroit.
Yeah, that's right.
Where he used to be a quarterback.
Yep. Anyway, 2019 NFL draft Oklahoma quarterback Kyler Murray, number 1 pick by the Arizona Cardinals, replacing quarterback
for Arizona.
Yeah, for Arizona. Do you remember who he replaced? Notorious Jewish quarterback.
That's not helping.
Josh Rosen.
Rosen. Okay.
Yes.
Who they had drafted the year before.
Who they had drafted
in the
year
top
before.
10, I think, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
There was a lot of talk when Rosen was coming out for the draft that Giants or Jets are going to take Josh Rosen to get the Jewish fan in New York. That's the only reason I remember that he's Jewish. There was a lot of talk about the Jets or the Giants going after Rosen for the Jewish fan in New York.
Because there's a lot of Jewish people, obviously, who aren't already fans. But suddenly, if the quarterback for one of those teams would be a Jewish man, they'd be like, oh, well, now I'm a Giants fan.
They're very committed to their people. Very committed.
Okay.
Boy, that was the oddest This Day in Sports History
It was.
segment
We better
ever.
just pick somebody and move on. Who you like? Or what do you? I mean, there's some whats in here, not just the who's.
How about the Goalposts? You like the Goalposts?
Sure.
Okay.
One thing you liked.
So, actually, the day this podcast drops, it will be my birthday.
That's right.
So tomorrow. So over the weekend, my wife made me a homemade birthday cake.
Okay.
It was chocolate and peanut butter. So it was a chocolate cake covered in peanut butter frosting. It was about 8 to 10 inches tall.
Okay.
And covered in Reese cups across the top, like broken up Reese cups across the top.
Wow.
It was delicious.
I'm a little disappointed you didn't bring some in to sample in the studio here.
I am sorry about that. It was I took it to Life Group with me yesterday, and it weighed about 4 to 6 pounds. It felt like. I mean, it was a heavy cake. It was a lot of cake going on there.
And so this is you're turning 35?
35. Yeah, halfway to 70.
Wow.
If my math is correct. Which,
it is,
honest,
actually, in this case.
It could be wrong.
Yes.
Yeah.
So more than a third of your life is over.
Most likely, yeah.
It seems unlikely you're going to live to 105.
We'll see. Only time will tell.
Seems unlikely. All right. Well, I guess I should wish you a happy birthday.
Better yet, come to Day of Giving tomorrow and wish me a happy birthday.
So you can rope me into recording something?
Yeah. If you'd record a thank you for us, that'd be great.
Yeah, we'll see.
Maybe I could get you to send it to somebody you know as a thank you.
Who knows?
What's your one thing, Doc?
So I have started listening to – you were the one I think that pointed me in this direction, at least one of the people, the Witch Trials of J.K. Rowling.
Oh, yes.
Podcast.
Yes.
I'm a couple episodes in, third episode, I think. Just fascinating to revisit the history and how she has gotten significant criticism from all ends of the spectrum in one sense, from very conservative Christians who were very much anti the witchcraft piece, and now on the very progressive left for her stance against against considering biological men who present themselves as women. She's against regarding them as women.
Yep.
And so, of course, the trans community is just outraged and trying to cancel her. And she's so powerful, influential, and wealthy that it doesn't matter. And she could care less.
Yeah.
And so it's funny to see them just losing their minds.
That's what happens when you write a generational story.
Yeah. Yeah. Which part of that podcast does tell a little bit of her life before she wrote that, which was a very hard luck life.
Oh, my goodness. Yes. A very, very difficult. But, as I was listening to that, I thought to myself, like, you want to know what? Some people go through those really hard moments and are able to bring about great art out of those very, very difficult moments. And she seems to have done that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or she definitely has done that. Full stop.
Yes. And now they're doing a TV series. Did I see this? A Harry Potter TV series?
Yeah.
I think she's involved in it.
I think she does a lot of the writing for those things.
Yeah. That'll be interesting to see how that pans out. There's probably such an appetite for it, it'll be fine. Right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Such a large appetite.
I'd check it out as long as it's not on HBO and I don't have to pay extra for it.
See, but I think it might be on one of those. I think it might be on HBO.
Is HBO owned by NBC?
Oh, is it? No, I don't know.
Because NBC Universal owns – it'd be on Peacock
Maybe
then.
On Peacock. Okay. Yeah. So be it. Okay.
Goodness. There was a time when I didn't care what studio did certain things, but now I have to know because, like, do I have that streaming service or would I have to get that streaming service in order to watch that?
Exactly.
Oh, goodness.
It's a wild time we live in.
We too. We live in wild times.
Yeah. We have talked sports.
Day of Giving.
We have talked Day of Giving.
Tomorrow.
Yes.
Or today.
Today, yes.
April 25th.
Yes.
Link in show notes.
We've talked your birthday.
A little bit, yeah.
35. More than 30. A 30-year life is over, John.
Most likely.
We have talked Catechesis. We have talked the NFL moving the goalposts back from the goal line to the back of the end zone.
Among other things in that segment. That was a wonky segment.
It's been a weird episode just because I feel like we just got thrown off through no fault of our videographer, who's great.
It's not Christian's fault.
It's not Christian's fault. It's just, I'm a creature of habit.
Hey, but new guest on the pod, I suppose.
No, he is not a guest on the pod. That does not count. We all know why that doesn't count. It does not count.
He did not speak. No.
That's correct. Okay. Well, John, we have covered our various and sundry topics, and so all that's left to say is until next time, the Lord bless y'all real good.
Later.